Today we are going to be working with opacity masks in Illustrator, and it works very similarly to Photoshop. Anytime that you are introducing black to a mask, it's going to hide that portion of the object that you're masking. So I just have this PK type here, and first I'm just going to introduce the tool. You will go to your transparency menu, which is, if you're viewing icons, it's these two little overlapping circles. If you don't have this palette up, you could always go to window, click on transparency, and that should pop the window up. But I have created this type, and anytime you want to look at things in outline mode, if you hit Command Y, so you can see it's already outlined. Command Y, toggle back and forth between that, and that's always a good tool to use in Illustrator. So I have this piece of type, created outlines, and it's graphic. Now when I'm using opacity masks, the first thing I will do is, again, in my transparency palette here, I will click on Make Mask. Now again, I have the object selected already. You can see the bounding box around it, and I'm just going to click on Make Mask. And when I do that, it actually adds all black to the mask. By default, it has this clipping thing checked off, and then you can see it basically makes everything disappear. So if I hit Command H to hide the edges, you can see my object is still selected and it's still there if I hit Command Y, but I've masked everything. So my second step, anytime I create this mask, is I always just uncheck this clip here. Uncheck it, and then that will turn the mask back to white, and you're starting from scratch, but it has created a mask here. So you can see now it's just like in Photoshop. You have your object or that portion of the layer and a little link, and then your mask is here. Now the only difference is, like in Photoshop, you would see all your objects as layers, and each layer you could have a mask on. Well, in Illustrator, you have a mask directly on the object. So again, it's linked to that object. So when I click off this object, there's nothing selected here, but again, you can see I have a mask. I'm just gonna hit Command Z a couple times to get rid of it. So just so I can show you, before you start and just select an object, there'll just be this little empty kind of box here, and then you'll have this Make Mask available. And again, when I click Make Mask, I can uncheck this clip, and again, now I have a mask here and it's filled with white. Now again, this works similarly to Photoshop. When I want to introduce stuff to the mask, I have to click on the mask portion of it to add black to that. Right now you see there's a blue highlight here, which means I'm on this object still. Now this is also something you have to pay very close attention to, because sometimes you'll be on the mask and you forget and you go to select something else and it won't let you. So I'll show you here. If I just create another object, I go click on here, and let's say I'm in the mask on here. So I'm going to click on here, and you can see it'll highlight that in blue now. Now if I go to select something else, it's not working, right? That's simply because I'm just in this mask world. So now, knowing I'm in the mask world, I'm just going to show you, if I take the brush tool, and same thing as in Photoshop, B is the quick key for that. And right now I just have this paintbrush tool, and again, I have black as my color here, so that means anything I'm painting with this brush is black, and it will basically hide this portion, as long as I'm in the mask section here. So watch. I'm going to just paint a little, just so you can kind of see it working. I can just kind of mess around. And now, once I've done the work I want to do in the mask, I will click back over to this part, the object, and again, that highlights in blue. And now if I select this, I'm just going to do some color changes here, just so you can kind of see that this now works, with transparency. So now I've masked these portions out of these letters, and it will reveal anything behind it. Again, similar to Photoshop. Same concept, just a different way of doing it. So that is basically the gist of the tool. And now I'll get into doing some more complex stuff with it. But as you can see, you know, just kind of like picking up what I did down here, literally just playing around with the brush tool. And you can always go back and edit in the mask. So again, I have this object, you know, I can move it around. The mask is linked to it. I can also unlink the mask just like in Photoshop. And then if I move it, you know, you could see the mask stuff remains separate from it. But generally you shouldn't be doing that unless you're, you know, creating things like this where you're trying to move things a little bit and just get them in a better position. But anyway, I'm going to go back into the mask just to edit a portion of this so you can see that even though I have a brush path here, you know, I can introduce other stuff to it, like I can introduce like brush textures and stuff, but basically anything that you do in here, you will it will affect that. Sorry, going back into my transparency, you know, I changed that just to a standard brush stroke that we have in here. And again, brushes, window, brushes, and if you want to find brushes. And you can also, there's some brush libraries that are in Illustrator. So if you want more than just these standard couple brushes that are in here, you can go into the brushes palette and then the little 3-line drop down menu here, go to open brush library, and there's all kinds, like artistic, chalk, charcoal, pencil, paintbrush. You know, let's just open up one of these so you can see, and then it gives you, you know, there's a whole bunch of different brushes you can use that are already just preloaded in Illustrator. So if I wanted to, you know, change it to any of these brush strokes, I can, and you can see it's masking. You know, I'm just messing around with these now, but so that's basically that. And again, I'll click, make sure I'm clicking back on the object so I can move it around, because again, if I'm on this mask and that's outlined, I can't select anything, right? I can only move around what's in the mask. So I can move these things around, you know, the actual things that are in the mask. But if I want to move this object around when I'm done, I'll just make sure I click on this part so it's outlined in blue, and then, you know, voila. And you can see again, even though it has this brush texture on it, it's still maintaining that transparency and all that complexity. And now you have a vector object that's scalable, you know, and it maintains perfect crispness and resolution. So okay, that's that. And then you know, again, I'm just going to introduce a couple more things you can do with it, and it's pretty easy. But again, just remember, anything that is black that you're adding to the mask, it will basically create you know, that transparency in that object, or masking those portions of the object out. So I'm actually going to go into the mask, and I'm just going to delete everything that we had in there, because what I want to do is, and I'm going to click back in the object section just so I can import an image. So Command Shift and P is the quick key to import images. So, you know, then you can navigate to your, you know, wherever you have your stuff. And I'm going to bring in this texture distress. And just so you can see, I'm importing an image that's like this. It's basically just an image that has some texture on it. And now this is just, again, just showing you another way that you can use these masks. So because this is a black and white image, and I've actually created a very high contrast texture here, so most of it is really black, and like, you know, there's maybe a little bit of grayscale in there. We could zoom in a little bit just so you can see the detail of it. But basically, for all intents and purposes, it's black and white. So I'm going to hit Command X, which copies it into the clipboard but removes it from sight. And then I'm going to click on my object. I'm going to go into the mask, and I'm going to hit Command F, which is paste in front. And you can see now I've introduced that texture into my type here. I'm just making it bigger just so you can really see the texture. And then I'm gonna click back on the object part here, and now same thing. You can see that it added that texture. Now, because this was an image texture, this actually won't necessarily scale up to be perfectly clean. Now, if you added a vector texture, you can create your own vector textures. We'll get into that in another lesson, but for this, I'm just using an image because it's quick and easy, and it's really easy to make those textures like we learned a few weeks ago when we were creating the brushes and making selections from channels in Photoshop. So, but again, that's just easy ways to introduce textures or changes to your objects in Illustrator using the opacity masks. And again, just to go down here, you can see that this is actually a blend in here, so I can do that really quickly. And then, even though there's texture in there, you can introduce things like gradients, black and white gradients, which will soften out some of the edges. So, I'll just do that really quickly too. And I'm just going to make this bigger so we kind of have a good background here. And again, it just ridicules the effect, so you can see that it doesn't matter what's behind it. It works the same as masks that we're used to in Photoshop. So I'm gonna and just to make this easier, when I first started using this tool, it was easier for me to create my black and white textures or objects and just bring it into the file first and then copy it into the mask. So again, I'm on the object, I'm not in the mask. And basically I'm just going to click on this. I'm on the object, that's highlighted, and I'm not in the mask yet. So if I bring something else into this window here, it will be in here and not in the mask. And I'll do it two ways just so you can see. So if I introduce a new shape, and I'm just gonna fill it with a simple black and white gradient, and I'm gonna copy it, or Command X rather, again, which copies it into the clipboard but removes it from the window. And then I'm gonna select in the mask, and I'm gonna just Command V in, just in the mask. So it's over here, so it's not affecting the type yet, but when I move it over, you can see it's basically adding a gradient. And again, because I'm using black and white, and it's creating white on top of this texture. So if I want to do an effect like this where it has the texture and the that gradient effect over it, I can just hit multiply, and then it will maintain that texture underneath. Or you can, instead of using white here, if I just click normal, instead of using white here, I can make that black, but just at a 0% opacity. And then again, same effect. But that's that. And again, I'm just kind of playing around with this here just so you could see. And then when I go back into my object and move it around, you can see, and actually probably to have this object so it doesn't get this weird kind of like white, halo-y kind of color, I'll multiply this whole thing if I'm going to do it on a background color, so it really picks up that color in there. And it's just kind of a cool way to mask these things and do transitions with your objects in Illustrator. So that's basically the tool. And again, all this other stuff is really just troubleshooting how to do it. I'll do that really quickly, but I'm going to go back into the mask, and I'm just going to delete all this other stuff for now, and start with a clean mask here. And again, for like I said before, you could either click here and you can create your shapes in black, just on the layer, and then copy them into the mask, right? Or you can actually just, while you're in the mask, you can also do the same thing and create shapes, and and again, I can create a shape and put a gradient on it, and that gradient will be in the shape. So that's that. And then I'm just going to do Command A to select everything in this mask and delete it, because I just want to show you, again, this is all just troubleshooting, but anything that you put in this mask that's black will mask that out. So I have this kind of blend going on here. So I'm just going to create something like that. If you don't know how to use the blend tool, this will be a quick little introduction. So I'm going to create a circle. I'm going to do Command C and Command F to paste it in front, and then I'm just going to do like a kind of a small to big kind of blend here. So you can see I have this small circle, and I'll just kind of pump up these line weights here just so we have a little bit thick to thin kind of thing going on. And if I click both of these objects, there's different ways to make blends, but I like to use quick keys. If you do Command Option B, it will just create a default blend. Sometimes the blend defaults to either one step or smooth color. And so this icon here, if you double click on that, it will launch the I don't know why this is not working. Usually, something's happening here. Okay, let's try that again. That's strange. Sorry, I just want to make sure we have everything correct here. Oh, sorry. It's popping up down here out of view. But basically, this is the window that pops up when you click on this little square to circle icon. And again, like I said, it usually defaults to either smooth color or like specified steps, and there'll be one step. But if you've done a couple of them in a row, it will often default to the last amount of steps that you've done. But this is only one step. I can add step is like how many steps in between these two shapes. Let's say I do 10. I'm going to click on preview just so you can kind of see. And that, creates a similar kind of effect that we have going on down here. And I'm just going to hit OK. And again, you can play around with this, and you can even mess around with the line weights. Maybe the outermost circle has the thinner line weight. Maybe that's like, I don't know, 1 point or something. And then the inside one has thicker line weights. And again, this blend, you could try it with different shapes, but you can see when I move it around, the blend kind of holds and stays together. But it's really just two objects. So if I hit Command Y, you can see I have my two objects, and this is just a blend effect. And again, if I double click this, it will open it up, and I can always change how many steps I want to put in here. Okay, and that's that. So I'm going to Command X, click on my object again, go to my mask, click on the mask, and I'm going to paste that in there. And then I'm going to just bring it over like this. And this is kind of a similar effect to what I had going on down here. And I can, scale these so that it covers the whole graphic here. And then I can even mess around with the lines. This is all editable. And going back, make sure I click on my object to get out of the mask mode here, and then again, works the same way with the transparency. So that is quickly how you can create most of these things. The only difference with any of this is that on this, I put the mask on this object here, and I just kind of mask that out, and I'll do that really quickly now. So I'm just going to duplicate this. Anytime you want to duplicate something, you click on it. And hold down Option while you move it and move it over, and it quickly will just duplicate it. So I'm going to go into the mask, delete what I had in the mask, go back to the object, and then I'm going to just import that water so you can see a quick way I can kind of mess around with layering using these masks. So I just pick this water, and I have this again, I have this object. I had the mask on it already, but again, if I want to release this mask, I can, and that just gets rid of it. If there was white, there was nothing in it. Actually, if you have something in your mask and you release it, that object will show up on top of the original object. So watch, I'm just going to do that really quickly. And again, the rings that we just created will show up. But I'll hit Command Z because that's really just showing you how to reveal it. But anyway, if I want to create a mask again, just to remind you, I click on my object, make mask. It will introduce an all black mask usually. If it doesn't, if it just introduces a white mask, maybe there's some default settings on the machine you're working on, then you're good. But basically what you're looking for is to uncheck these. So everything here is unchecked. So when I make a mask, I have the mask. You can see it here. It's linked to my object, but none of these things have a check mark next to it. So that's basically your starting point for a mask. Now that I made the mask, I'm going to click on it, and I'm just going to take the brush tool, and I'm painting in black here, and I'm going to make this bigger. And basically I'm actually still painting with the texture brush from earlier. I'm going to go back to basic. And you can, there's other like calligraphy kind of brushes up here that you can kind of paint with. I don't know why this keeps defaulting here. Let's see here. Yeah, it keeps defaulting to this brush. Let's try one of these brushes. Okay, this is good. So I have this brush up here, and again, I'm just showing you in my transparency. When I create, I can I'm just brushing some of this stuff away right now, and then if I want to go back, now again, it works the same thing as as in Photoshop. If you paint black, it gets rid of that in the mask, but I can also and right now, since I'm painting with a path, I'll make that path color white to fill it back in, and then when I click on some of these areas to follow this water, you can see it's kind of like following that. And now I've kind of masked this away, and it's just kind of a way to cheat using masks with organic shapes in Illustrator. And again, if I move this though, it will still, it'll have that shape in it. But just a quick way to do something like this. And then, again, this is a blend effect down here, similar to what we did over here. This is just taking that texture image and edging out some of the graphics. And then, just once you have a mask on an object, you can put it in a group and then create another mask on that. So there's, it's kind of like Photoshop where you're like creating groups of folders. You can kind of nest these objects together. So if I wanted to take this object and this object, these two objects together, hit Command G, then I can, if I want, I can make a mask that object. And, let's say I wanted to texture this whole image. I'll bring that texture image again. And, I'm going to bring it in. Let's see, maybe something like that. I'm going to hit Command X, go to this group. Now with my mask on it that I've already created, go into the mask session, paste in front, and now I have this, a mask on this group. But if I still select my, again, I go back to the object part of the layer, but if I still select my, this group of type here, you can see I still have that mask there, and I can, do more to that if I want. And that's basically the gist of it. So we will probably practice and introduce some other things with this tool, but this is basically how you use it. Just create the mask and introduce black to it, and you will, again, I'll do that. What I always do, just so you can see it's picking up all the background behind it. So it really is a very powerful set of tools that you can use here. Thank you very much.